Hi, in this video, I'd like to provide you with an overview of key concepts related to phonological and phonemic awareness. I'm really anticipating that this will be useful for those of you that are into early literacy as well as elementary teaching. This class contains students who are going to teach grades K through 12. Some of you are planning to teach kindergarten through second grade. Those of you that are planning on teaching that are the ones that'll find this particular video of most use. By the time students reach second grade, they really should have this stuff down pat, even first grade for that matter. The topics in this video won't really be of much use for those of you in middle school or high school teaching, unless you want an overall knowledge of the Big Five in reading and key topics of the Big Five in reading. Because one thing that we do tend to get wrong in our instruction is that we tend to treat middle school teachers and high school teachers as if the only thing they really need to know is vocabulary and comprehension. They can skip the earlier stuff. Well, reading is additive. And so I don't think you really can have a grasp on what good reading instruction amounts to without understanding reading in the big picture to include early literacy. So hopefully that's where those of you that plan on teaching middle grades in high school find this useful. I'm going to try to make sure that throughout this course there's good material that I'm providing to you so that those of you that teach K through 12 will find this of use, but also those of you that are planning to be middle school, high school teachers will also find this course to be of use as well. Okay, so moving forward, first of all, there are certain stages in reading that are considered to be important for you to know about in early literacy. Airy has a concept, Linnea Airy has a concept of stages of beginning reading, especially that deal with word recognition. And this is very important for you to know in early literacy. You've got the pre-alphabetic stage, which is where a child uses environmental and visual cues, and they're very much deeply reliant on that. That's early grades, as in before kindergarten. Then you've got the pre-alphabetic stage, which is where they don't quite have the grasp on how to use the alphabet yet. This is where children are beginning to read words by forming connections, but only with certain letters. Then you've got the full alphabetic, which is where they can read words by forming complete connections, and they can get into segmenting, and that's basically forming connections between sound parts. Then you've got the consolidated alphabetic, which is where children can read words more fully. They can chunk words together using prefixes, roots, suffixes, syllables of words. And of course, you would need to teach your early grades instruction according to which stage the child is in. So more with Airy, and again, this deals with early literacy, of course. At the pre-alphabetic stage, the child has little or no alphabetic knowledge, and the child will use certain visual cues to figure out, or oral cues to figure out what a word means. So children at this stage, pre-alphabetic, will recognize some words as pictures and read words in whole parts. It's more, they recognize the word cat almost like it's a picture, and they recognize, okay, this is cat, but they can't actually read. It's more like recognizing that word as if it's a picture. They use context clues, pictures, and it's guessing type strategies. They'll match voice to print oftentimes. And so they'll look at meaning making for cues. Then you get into the partial alphabetic. This is where children will demonstrate emerging use of recognizing graphemes, that's written symbols in a word, and phonemes, that's speech sound. And they'll begin to make connections between the written symbols on a page and speech sounds they hear people make. Usually the connections are incomplete and unreliable, though, at this early stage. So you've got, just to make sure you know some of these terms, a grapheme is the written representation for each sound part in a language. You think of ka-at, has sound parts. Well, if you were to write that out in writing, though the cat in writing would become a grapheme once it's in writing. Graphemes are combined to create written language. So when we deal with instruction for children at the partial alphabetic stage, you want to reinforce letter sound knowledge and reinforce their knowledge of what these sound parts represent. You want to emphasize this using letters for each word very explicitly. Match the letter to the sound. You want to do a lot of pre-teaching, front-loading of the sound and letter matching. I've given you a video to watch here. These videos, for those of you that are middle secondary and you're never going to use this, I'm not expecting you to watch these videos. But for those of you that are planning on teaching, let's say, pre-kindergarten or kindergarten first grade especially, I think that these videos of teaching in action would be very useful for you. At the full alphabetic stage, typically children reach this stage in about kindergarten to first grade. The child will attend every letter in every word. The words are accessed by converting letters into sounds. That's called phonological recording, and sounds into words. The child has gained knowledge of most letter-sound correspondences. The child also has phonemic awareness, and the child can begin early stages of phonics. Then you've got the full alphabetic stage. At this stage, the instruction should focus on segmenting and blending phonemes. We'll get more into that in a bit. And paying attention to the correspondence between sounds and letters. So you want to very explicitly teach correspondence between the letters and the sounds. Then you get into consolidated alphabetic. Children will begin to use chunks and to decode. They'll get into phonics. They'll get into multi-letter patterns called phonograms that are consolidated into memory and recognized instantly. This is where you can teach a child word recognition, for instance. And children can also consolidate word families, beginnings of words, and patterns. Here's an interview that those of you that are into early literacy, I think would really benefit from. So phonological awareness is basically an umbrella term that includes both awareness of words at the sound level and also awareness of larger units such as syllables and onset and rhyme. And onset would be the beginning of the word, the rhyme would be the ending of the word. Then you've got phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness would be the awareness of an ability to identify and manipulate the sequence of sounds in words in spoken language. Bottom line is phonological and phonemic awareness deals with sounds. Here's the phonological umbrella that you'll often see if you look this up. The top of the umbrella would be the large units like words, syllables, onsets, and rhymes. The middle of the umbrella would be phonemic awareness, the awareness that these things exist. The bottom of the umbrella would be the small units, where children can isolate, identify, categorize certain uses. Now, if you're dealing with science of reading approaches, remember science of reading approaches as encouraged by Arkansas are very much bottom up. So you would want to focus on bottom of the umbrella, then the middle, then the top. So the basic parts of phonological awareness would include at the bottom of the umbrella phoneme awareness. Then you get into awareness of meanings of the beginnings of the words and then the endings of the words, that's onset rhyme. Then you get into awareness of syllables and words, and then toward the top of the umbrella, you've got awareness of whole words. Now, one difference between, let's say, whole language approaches and structured literacy approaches, and this is one reason why there's such a debate in early literacy. Traditionally, whole language approaches would start with whole word awareness and then work their way down toward phoneme, oftentimes playing with language and playing with words in context, whereas structured literacy approaches, as advocated by Spears, Rowling, and Motes, and David Kilpatrick and others, and frankly advocated by the state of Arkansas. Structured literacy approaches focus on phoneme awareness, then build up to onset rhyme awareness, then syllable awareness, then word awareness. So you can see opposite approaches. That's one reason why the debate is so strong. So here are some key concepts. First of all, at the beginning level, young children would have what's called phonological sensitivity. And that's an awareness of the units of speech in sound parts such as rhymes, beginnings of words, as well as syllables. Generally speaking, this is acquired without explicit instruction. They'll oftentimes pick this up just casually. Often, this is a focus in kindergarten practice. Oftentimes, it can be picked up through music and game and conversation. Then you've got phonemic proficiency. This is where you've got proficiency in phoneme awareness skills, such as sight vocabulary, orthographic mapping, the ability to, like that, recognize words. You've got what's called phonograms. Phonograms are for instance, in consonant blends, you've got two or more consonants that are blended together, but each sound may be separately heard. Bull, burr, click, crack, drip. You can see these examples of consonant blends. Consonant blends can be pretty difficult for young children. Then you've got digraphs, which is where you combine two letters representing one sound. Phone, for instance, with a PH. That can also be sometimes difficult and confusing for students, especially, frankly, second language learners at the early literacy level. And then you've got vowel teams. This is basically vowel digraphs, where you've got two vowels are written next to each other, each producing a single sound. Train, mail. Notice the AI in there. That's a vowel team. Phonological awareness is basically addressed at the basic level of awareness of speech sounds, where children gain the skill of listening, and they can have little alliteration games and segment sentences together and syllable segmentation. Phonological awareness is basically defined as knowing speech sounds. This includes phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness fits under the overall umbrella of phonological awareness. Instruction of phonological awareness should focus on guiding children to identify and manipulate units of oral language, clapping games, music games, that sort of thing. And here's an example of classroom instruction dealing with phonological awareness for those of you that are going to be kindergarten first grade. A phoneme is a unit of sound that distinguishes one word from another. It's the smallest unit of sound within a word. The understanding that sounds within spoken language work together to create words is what we want to get to with phonemic awareness. It's also the ability to notice, think, and work with individual sounds within words. For instance, the ability to combine and blend individual sounds in words such as bat, ba-at. Phonemes are the smallest units in spoken language. That's a typo. It should be 42 phonemes. Sorry about that. I should have caught that, but it's actually 42. Phonemic awareness is the ability to focus on and manipulate phonemes in speech sounds. It is both an understanding and a skill. So it is easier for children to identify beginning and ending sounds than to recognize sounds in the middle of a word. You want to have explicit and systematic instruction in phonemic awareness integrated within a literacy program, combined with other aspects of literacy instruction. So there are different types of phoneme instruction. You've got phoneme isolation, where children isolate sounds of a word. Tell me the first sound in bat, and then children would identify b. You've got phoneme identity. A child recognizes the common sound in different words. They recognize common sounds and tell me the same sound in bug, bat. So again, b. Phoneme categorization is when children recognize the word with different or odd sound. They identify the word with the odd sound in a sequence. Which word does not belong in bat, bag, rug? Obviously, they would need to identify rug. Phoneme blending is where children listen to a sequence of separately spoken sounds, and then they combine this sequence to form a recognizable word. Phoneme segmentation is where children break words apart into syllables, and they break out the word into separate sounds. What are the sounds in bag? Bag. Phoneme segmentation deals with, it can be assessed by asking children to tap out the number of phonemes or syllables in a word. Children might work with this in a group. They might make sound parts. They might make rhymes out of words. Phoneme deletion deals with recognition of what word remains after a specific phoneme has been removed. Phoneme substitution deals with children deleting a phoneme from a word, then replacing or adding a different phoneme to take its place to form a new word. Structured literacy has a very specific way in which phonemic awareness is taught. In phonemic awareness, you want to guide children toward noticing and thinking about and working with phonemes. In structured literacy, there's an emphasis on sounds in spoken language that is distinct from and prior to phonics instruction. So again, you focus on phonemic awareness before you get to phonics instruction. Phonemic awareness is used as a starting point for teaching about print. And this discussion from Maria Murray would be very useful for you that are going into kindergarten, first grade. Explicit instruction is encouraged at all grade levels, K through 12, which is where you directly model new skills, you guide students to the correct response, you give immediate corrective feedback as needed, and you practice skills toward mastery and automaticity. Systematic instruction is also encouraged, K through 12, which is where you give consistent instructional routines that guide students toward correct responses. Notice it's very much in line with behaviorism. Instructional time is carefully allocated to maximize time on task, and you give cumulative review of what you've been doing. And the state very much wants sequential instruction, where skills are taught in order from easier to harder. You teach prerequisite skills like phonemic awareness first before you get into harder skills like phonics. Component or foundational skills are taught directly to eventually support the higher order skills involved in vocabulary and comprehension. You want to have a very intentional sequence within and across your lessons and within and across grade levels. And I provide you with an example here. Assessment is very key to good instruction. So an assessment guides a teacher to know whether and what type of phonemic awareness is needed. Obviously, you don't need to deal with phonemic awareness instruction when children have already mastered it. And if children have already mastered phonemic blending, then don't teach that. You want to focus on categorization instead. Assessment is what will tell you what's needed. There are various types of assessments for phonemic awareness available. Your school is, as part of a PLC, professional learning community, is likely to identify which type they want you to be using, of course. As a generalist teacher, I'm not asking you to know that. So you want to involve yourself in very much data-driven instruction. This is where you consider multiple data points when making a decision, including data from screening tests, formative assessment of work and action, and your own observations as a teacher that you're logging and journaling. Decisions are made typically by a team of educators working together as part of a professional learning community and an assessment team. Interventions, as needed, are structured to provide more time and intensive support as needed for the child who might be struggling in a certain area. There's a concept that we'll get into further in this class called response to intervention, which is a form of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. For children who are hypothetically struggling in phonemic awareness in first grade, and especially by the time they get to second grade, if they're struggling in phonemic awareness type of areas by the time they get into second grade, they really do need RTI. Tier 1 is your general level education. Tier 2 is when you've got more specific intervention and specific type of support, often in line with your core unit of instruction and together with a specialist. Tier 3 is targeted specific skills done by a specialist. Tier 3 is much more intense. And again, you want especially at the intervention level, you want your instruction to be very explicit with the students. You can involve them in language play and exposure to language, that's conversation, to provide support in addition to your direct instruction. Oftentimes the English language learners, when they're working with phonemic awareness, you want to work in small groups, combined with letter identification to aid in transfer of skills. Instruction should be explicitly focused on one or two skills at a time. Don't overload your students. Segmenting and blending sounds prepare students to eventually decode words. And decoding, we'll get more into that when we get into phonics, deals with translating print into speech. Decoding deals with fluently matching letters to sounds and recognizing the patterns. Segmenting is when children learn to blend different types of phonemes, sound parts, so they can identify the patterns. So certain steps that you can take in phonemic awareness. Instruction include the use of data to make instructional decision making. Engage students in language play, conversation, and music and rhyme. Use tips and cues and hints at just the right moment to facilitate growth. You can use chants, poetry, songs, and rhymes to make it fun. And you want to explicitly label sounds in the room. You can have, as opposed to, let's say, just a letter chart on the board, you might have sound charts on the wall too, to help them memorize sounds. And you want to demonstrate the process of blending and segmenting sounds very explicitly. So with rhyme generation, for instance, one type of instruction you can give, that's where students will identify the rhyme within a context of a poem or a song. They'll practice making words through generating rhymes. They'll manipulate the beginning as well as the ending of the word. The rhyme, again, is basically the stem of the word. It's the at in bat. The onset is the beginning of the word. The onset would be the b in bat. And students can learn to manipulate this. You want to very strategically often use poems and songs with young children. Display selected sentences from a song or poem to introduce an activity in, let's say, little sentence strips. Guide students as they create their own sentence. And you want to be very collaborative in your instruction. This is basically a good professional learning community type of instruction. You want to have a very clear idea of what you want your students to learn in relation to phonemic awareness or other concepts. That's what's called your essential, guaranteed, and viable curriculum. You're going to make sure students know this. You want to have, as part of your team of teachers, an agreed upon way in which you know that the learning will be done, including your use of assessments. You want to know how you will respond when students don't learn. That gets into intervention. And you want to have a good idea of how you will provide enrichment activities for students who might be ahead of other students. Okay, so that's your overall view of good phonemic awareness instruction. Take care.